And one of the other brilliant points in the book that I think you might be the first person I've ever heard talk about it, but I think a lot of coaches eventually come to know this is like, you said something about how the plateaus are sometimes a good thing. And I think you were talking about like the set point, but you also made mention of just like, that's means you're not moving backwards. So, and I think people are so hard on themselves. As soon as they set a goal, they're essentially, maybe even subconsciously telling themselves that they're unhappy with where they are now. And I think that there's obviously some motive for change. And maybe if it takes a little shame and guilt, great, but we don't want to carry that with us on the whole journey. We want this to be a fun and rewarding experience. So I love that you made point of that, because I have coaches that work in my training studios. And one of the things that I feel like is a mark of maybe a newer coach is the frustration, like you're saying, that like, hey, my clients aren't taking the advice. They're not taking this seriously. They're not seeing progress. And sometimes not getting worse is progress. And you don't know that client, the client that didn't come to you and doesn't work out with you 3 times a week and implement 10% of your advice. You don't know what that person would look like. You don't know what the state of their, health would be. And I just thought that was a brilliant point, because here you are selling, the mindset of changing these incredibly difficult habits to make stick. But you're also saying, like, if I'm interpreting it correctly, you're saying, hey, don't be so hard on yourself. You aren't making as much progress as you think, but you're still making progress by not moving. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that how you meant that?
Nailed it. I think most people have no idea what progress looks like. We
Mm,
romanticize the end result as opposed to truly understanding the process that gets you there. And part of any type of progress, right, getting from where you are to where you want to be, is going to require some level of stagnation. But stagnation is not a bad thing if you're still on the path to where you want to go. I love to tell people, like, there's not really wrong decisions in life, right? The only wrong decision is in action. Because let's say you make a decision and the behavior or the output does not go the way that you want. That was, in some ways, a right decision, because you just learned that was a bad decision. You learn the negative effect that you have. You know not to make that step again. And you might save yourself how much time, because you know that was a bad move, as opposed to if you didn't take any action whatsoever, you wouldn't know all of the different missteps, and you'd still be sitting there wasting time, where you're eventually going to like step on one of these landmines, right? Like, we all step on landmines in life. And if you can understand that, like, again, we're saying, like, life is your greatest teacher. Plateau is a part of the drive to success. Mistakes are a part of the drive to success. But if you understand that, if you understand, right, if like someone's coming to you, if you're a coach, someone's coming to you and they're there 3 days a week and they're not seeing the success they want, but they're still coming to you. They see a value. They're building the habit. They're creating routine. They're making exercise or showing up or being accountable more of a consistent or automatic part of their life. And like, that has a huge net benefit, because how many people just don't even show up? Right. And like, that can be part of the journey. And sometimes it takes an aha moment, or like, progress is never as linear as you want, but like, you have to understand that like process goals can be broken down to the most simplest behaviors of, do people have intent and are they taking action? And if they have intent and if they're taking action, that means they're doing the things they fundamentally need to do to make progress. You just might not be seeing the rate of change as quickly as you want. And that's because we're all impatient. Everyone wants everything faster than is usually conceivably possible. And if we can change the way that we look at progress, if we can change the way we look at these process goals, we can get more comfortable with a slower time period, which means you don't get frustrated. One of the biggest things that I try and point out in this book is, it's not our mistakes or our maladaptive behaviors that cause the most trouble with diet and exercise. It's our reaction to them. We catastrophize, right, the plateau. We catastrophize the mistake. We catastrophize the missed workout. We catastrophize the dessert we eat. And that is our reaction to those behaviors that are the problem, where you have that one dessert, right? It's like, if someone ate like a whole bunch of vegetables in one meal and one meal only, you wouldn't be like, wow, you're the healthiest person in the world. But we do the inverse. We're like, they have one dessert and like, I'm the least healthy person in the world. I'm not going to eat well for the rest of the week or the rest of the month. And I once heard Dr. Spencer Nadolsky put it like best, where he's describing like people's self-sabotage with diet, where it's like people eat dessert and that maybe is akin to like getting a flat tire. And normally if you get a flat tire, right, like you go and like put air in it or you go get it replaced. But with diet or exercise, people slash the other 3 tires. And how does that make any sense? But that is truly what happens. And that's why we get screwed. Instead of just patching the tire or replacing the tire and just keep on driving, we slash off 4 and you're like, well, I got no car now. And like, so now I can't go anywhere. If people stop catastrophizing and beating themselves and punishing, as you said, the shame and the guilt in this cycle, and saw more of these behaviors as normal, as long as they were not happening the majority of the time, it's just a blip on the radar. It truly doesn't register in the same way that like eating vegetables for like 1 meal a day doesn't make you a healthy person. These little inconsistencies that, if done repeatedly, are bad, but if done infrequently, they don't matter. They don't matter at all. And if you can just learn to move forward, if you can just learn to not catastrophize and not punish, and that's the only thing you change, where you just don't beat yourself up, where you do the thing that you know you're not supposed to do, you're going to be 10 times better off than you were before, because you're no longer going into that guilt cycle, which is where all of the damage is done, right? You go into the guilt cycle, you feel bad, you screw up the rest of your meals, you stop going to gym for a week, and then what happens? You feel terrible. You feel terrible because you let yourself down. You feel terrible because you're eating terribly. You feel terrible because like now you're sore and achy and like you don't have the same energy because you were in such a good routine, you blew it up. But it was never the triggering event. It was never the first domino. It's like the domino actually lives in isolation. It falls down and nothing happens, but people go ahead and they see the rest of the dominoes and they're like, oh, might as well just knock them all over. Stop that. And everything is better. And that is in life, right? Like, what I told this story on like another podcast, never told before, where like the long story short is like I tried to do something great. My older son was like, I don't want to go to a birthday party this year. I want to go to Disney instead. And I'm like, not the same cost at all, kid. But I like the way your mind's at. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to surprise you. I was traveling a ton at the time. I was like, never home. So I'm like, I'm going to go and like take you and surprise you to Disney World, right? So like we went to Disneyland. It was California. Booked the flights, do everything. We've been to Disney before, but like I surprised them. We're there. And Disney, pre-COVID, you could just walk up, get tickets, and go in. I didn't realize post-COVID they put a quota on how many people you can let in. I go in, they're like, do you have tickets? And I'm like, I'll buy the tickets. And they're like, no. You have to like pre-buy them and pre-purchase them. And man, you want to see the soul be sucked out of a child real fast? Get them all dressed up in costumes and fly them out to Disney and get them there. And then to find out the person's being like, yeah, there's no tickets for like 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And I truly remember going back to my hotel room as I like tried to figure out going on. Like I like went into the bathroom and like just cried because it was just like I'd never felt like a worse father in my life.
That's awful.
And it was for my older son. My younger son was there too. He's even like they're both crying. They're literally in their Avengers costumes, and I'm like, man, this was really stupid. And you have that moment where it's just like, you know what, I can be in a terrible mood and I can be really upset and I can yell at my wife or I can yell at my kids or I can just like burn the whole thing down, or I could say, you know what, I screwed up and that was a pretty big mistake. I'm pretty sure my kids are never forgetting that one, right? Now, or you can go and be like, no matter what, I'm going to try and make this better. And I put together like a plan of what we're going to do, going to have fun. And then I literally walk back and I saw like all the attendants, and I'm like, I will go up to every single one of these attendants until I find one who gets me into the park. And I remember like talking to this one woman who had 7 children and talking to her forever, just being like, I've been traveling, I surprised my kid. She's like, what are you doing flying your family out to LA without buying tickets first? I'm like, rules. I made a mistake. I did this. She's like, I'm just like, it's like sales. I was just trying to keep her on the line. I'm like, please let me just like take my kids. I'll pay anything. And she like disappeared. And when she disappeared, I like go talk to her boss. I thought for sure, I'm like, I'm in. And she comes back and she's like, I'm sorry, park sold out.
Wow.
And she's like, the best I can do for you is there are two things right now. She's like, you can buy tickets right now, and it's essentially it's like $1,000, right? There's like four of us going to Disney, and you can check at like 11 o'clock at night and see if anyone cancels their tickets, and then like you're essentially on the wait list, but you have 2 weeks to use this, and otherwise like the pass expires. And I'm like, I'm here for like 2 days, but I'm like, you know what? I consider this the dummy tax. I'm gonna put together a plan for my kids. We're gonna have fun. We're in California. I'm gonna go do other stuff. We're gonna make this fun. But this is my stupid penalty, right? Like, here's $1,000, give it to me. And I just thanked her. I'm like, thank you. Like, this was my fault. This was my mistake. But I appreciate you giving me a chance, right? Like, all I wanted was a chance. You're giving me a chance, and that's all I need, right? And I'm right about to pay, and like a woman comes up from the side. She's like, I gotta tell you something. And I'm like, who are you? She's like, I'm her boss. I sit here every day, and all people do is yell at my attendance for reasons that are not their fault. And like, you've been here for like 30 minutes now, pleading, begging. We just came back and told you, you got to pay whatever. It was like $1,200. I think it was whatever it was. Right. And you thanked her just even for an opportunity. And she was like, that was the kindest thing I've seen here. She's like, I'm getting you and your family into the park for the next
Oh
couple
my
days, taking
God,
care of
that's
you.
awesome.
And it was just like the lesson for my kids was great. Like, kindness wins, even though
Mhm.
my stupid planning fails. But the real thing was like, right, I knocked down that first domino, and I could have like burned the whole thing down, but like I know enough that like catastrophizing doesn't do anything. Once the mistake is done, the mistake is done. You own it. You take accountability for it. You try and make it better. But then you're like, okay, I tell my kids all the time, and it's something that adults need to hear. Like, we all have a superpower, and the superpower is we can always make it better.
Mm.
We can always, I can't guarantee what the output, can't guarantee, but we can always make it better. And if we remember that, no matter what we have done, oh man, a lot of good things tend to happen.